Oh, certainly. I think part of audience engagement in any community media output has to have some sort of entertainment as well as information and education aspect to it. Life would be pretty boring without that. In Australia, the peak body, the CBAA, has negotiated for many years ago, and occasionally it gets updated. It has negotiated a whole of community sector arrangement with the licensing entities, APRA, PPCA and so forth. So there's a fixed amount, a fixed percentage of community broadcast, each community broadcaster's revenue that gets paid on a collective basis back through the CBAA to the copyright licensing bodies. It's the same rate, and in fact, right at the moment, it was lesser. And there's some of the stations that don't broadcast much music have a lesser rate, but there's an issue at the moment where the copyright bodies are trying to increase the rate for the commercial entities, which will end up having a follow-through effect for the community sector if that did happen potentially, but may not necessarily, because there's a cap ultimately. But anyway, it's a process of negotiation, an industry-wide or community sector-wide negotiation that's occurring. The other aspect to it is not only that license is to cover all broadcasting output, so there's a debate going on at the moment in Australia about whether that includes or not the internet or web delivery aspects of a broadcast feed. And I think, while I've been travelling, I think there's been a ruling on that which has said that it does. So that means the one fee covers the lot, which is what the I think that's not the case in Australia for sure. It's based on gross revenue of the entity using the music, if you like. In this case, the community broadcasting organisations, and it's a flat fee beyond that. And there's also a reporting aspect where, in order for the artists ultimately to get their fair share of the revenue from the copyright handling agencies, then there has to be some process of what was played. So there's a logging and reporting aspect to it too for each of the stations, which over time has varied about how that's done. And sometimes it's done on a sort of best guess based on samples. Sometimes it's more rigorously done on specific stations as then an example that can be extrapolated for other stations. And increasingly, with people using more sophisticated electronic playout systems and so forth, it's easier to be absolutely accurate about it, but that isn't quite the case yet.
In terms of numbers and spread?
Oh yes, in Australia, of all the community radio stations in Australia, 70% of them are outside of the major cities, so they're all
mostly rural.
Mostly regional and rural and remote stations in Australia. Yes, Australia's a very physically large country with a very dispersed population in the remote and regional areas, and then a very heavily populated eastern seaboard, and with one or two dots elsewhere of larger cities. But basically, the population is crammed around the coastline. The vast areas inside it are quite thinly populated with little regional towns and remote communities. So most of the community stations numerically are in those areas. The larger ones obviously are in the larger cities. And there's quite distinct resource issues for the rural and regional stations and remote stations that are quite different from the capital city stations. They all have resource issues, don't get me wrong, but the regional remote ones they're of a different dimension. They have issues with sustainability and from a technical management and content programming point of view. that I think are alleviated and assisted a lot by a collaborative approach across all the stations, where you can try to share some of the expertise, even some of the content, as I think I mentioned in one of the sessions. I think that's critically important to help people obtain material that they might never be able to get otherwise, and be able to use it in the context of their own programming. There's not an issue of it necessarily replacing their local programming, but for instance, someone's visiting Australia, like a musician, we were talking music, you know, that a lot of people are interested in, and if you're in a very remote area they may never get there, but someone from a collegiate station may be able to interview the artist or do something that's more focused about that artist and share that with everybody, that everyone can benefit from while that's happening in the country. Personally, I feel it would be better if the stations were able to stay on air with something, even if it's not their ideal local programming, and even if there is some repeating. I don't think there's too much wrong with repeating programs if they're well focused, and I don't think there's too much wrong, if you have no other option, about using other program material to keep the station on air, so long as you maintain the ambition to flesh it out with the desirable programming in the medium term. Absolutely, because I think there's some virtue in just being there from a listener's point of view. If you're tuning your radio or pressing the button to find the radio and it's just not there at all, that might be the only time the person does that and you've lost them.
Yeah.